Right, okay, so episode 16 of the Sisyphus complex solution. Going through the very step-by-step slow progress measure to recreate the Hoskyns wiring map. And smoking and drinking at the same time, hence the cough. Right, this particular episode, it's called Allodoxaphobia, and that's a word that I would have thought would have been quite widely used these days, because there are a great many allodoxaphobics out there, and what that basically means is it's a fear of opinions. The fear of opinions and being afraid of hearing what others think of you. The more common parlance for the same term is to be an absolute wuss. And there's a lot of people out there that fit into that particular category. So this particular title for the episode, is it for a specific reason within this program? Probably on a couple of occasions, yes. But it could apply at any point throughout the entire process, because, as we know, people are afraid of opinions these days. So, a bit of Jameson's with ginger ale, going back to that one again. And a very decent sized portion of Jameson's as well. Get the 1 litre bottle this week. Makes a bit of a change from wine every now and again. Right, I have watched a whole range of different programmes this week, as per usual. There's not something that I'm going to be recommending in particular. Stuff to look out for, and I mean the controversial one this past week, and that was Joe Rogan having Alex Jones on. That was mildly amusing until it got to the later stages when Joe Rogan's continual fact checking became quite irritating. Tim Pool having the quite idiotically named Vosh or whatever the hell it is he's called. The commie moron. Anyway, several different things. Not my problem, not my program. Go check out whatever it is that you want to look at. Oh, you might want to check out Reasoned, actually, that I saw not that long ago, because Darren Grimes is talking to Lawrence Fox about the Reclaim Party. That's giving some hints. Not too many, but a few hints as to what that Reclaim Party is going to be about. And also pay attention to the Heritage Party. Essentially, it looks like we're looking towards finally having developments of parties being formed, officially formed and registered, that have actually got some level of what would be normally considered to be conservative values, but in this day and age it's just basically common sense values. Because the Conservative Party are not conservatives, they're blue socialists. So, let's move into our own little investigation as to what government looks like this week. So, continuing the process, still within Business, Energy, Industrial Strategy Department. As I said before, there's a number of different offices there, and I'm trying to do something like around about 3 per week. So it will take time, but that's the whole point. You're supposed to take your time and look at things before you start trying to scream and shout of how you're going to be repairing them. So the first one this week is the Met Office. As you'll have noticed from the last couple of weeks, when I come across a office that is actually a net contributor to the government, I put it in blue, and here we have the Met Office that is a net contributor, not by a massive amount, the 571k, but it's a net contributor nonetheless. However, whereas previously I've given praise to net contributors, or at least said that, give them a little bit of a pat on the back, on this occasion, no. You're not going to get any praise out of me at the Met Office, and you're not going to get any praise out of me on account of what anybody would normally expect, and that is just because of the absolute bullshit that comes out of this department. On top of the more obvious thing, anybody that's actually based in the UK will understand this. The amount of times they actually get the weather correct, the weather predictions correct in the UK, and that is rare as rocking horse shit. So they fail in one fundamental way, as far as I'm concerned, which is obviously the crap that they put out over climate change. So if we go up the top left, and you've got the little circle there, and that with our purpose, and deliver social and economic benefits. Oh, piss off! How about just getting the bloody weather right? It becomes the most common problem amongst all departments, that they all have to throw out some bloody social justice warrior bullshit that's got nothing to do with what they're supposed to be doing. Just concentrate on your fucking job, and you can't get that right. And then they have to be the ones that continuously go down the road of, oh, climate change this and the world is going to bloody end. And yet every single piece of data that I've got underneath here, and that all of the graphs, all show that within the UK, fuck all's going on. All of this nonsense of we're getting worse weather, and oh, it's getting hotter, and oh, this is happening, and oh, that's happening. No, it bloody well isn't. And practically every country you go across the world, nothing that's never been experienced before is taking place. It is all total bollocks. Anybody that's seeing me say this for the first time, go back and have a look at some of the other episodes, and until you can give me the scientific method for man-made AGW, until you can tell me and show me the evidence for somebody having solved the closure problem with models, seriously, fuck off. I don't want to know, because literally all evidence suggests that it's bollocks. This isn't a political matter. This is about, I mean, this is why you end up with all this postmodernist bullshit and the socialist arseholes, because they have to just lie about everything. That's why you end up with the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, and they're trying to push so much bullshit through because they can't come up with anything that is actually true. Whether it comes down to your Ponzi China virus, or whether it's the climate crap, or anything, and that's for them to be able to steal control over people, lie to people, manipulate people. That's all they can do, because the facts do not stand up. And when you've got a government department that is going along with that, then I've got a problem with that department. And these people would be gone. They would essentially go through a two-stage process, and the first one would be anybody that is being an ideologue, anybody that is pushing lies, anybody that is pushing agenda, anybody that is refusing to look at the facts, as even including this sort of stuff that I've got up here, and these graphs that show no fucking massive climate change, no end of the world scenario, nothing. If somebody in those offices cannot accept those facts, then they need to fuck off. They need to get out of office, because they do not belong there. They're not scientifically minded, they do not understand evidence, they do not understand their job, they do not belong in public office. So they'll be thrown out immediately. And as much as I've said at the beginning that I would be very careful and very cautious around changing departments to make sure that we don't cause a great deal of unemployment or anything like that, I would also not tolerate ideologues and people that are out to absolutely determined to destroy other people's lives. Fuck them. Let them have a taste of their own medicine. If they want to see lives destroyed, have their own fucking life destroyed first. Piss off to bloody China or whatever, and if you go be a commie somewhere else. Not interested. Then, because of the extent of the bullshit that these people have been putting people through, it's fairly similar to like when I'll come to a bit later on, and that with the likes of the BBC and what have you. If these people have been determined to put something together that has got such ill intent, it does not belong within government. So, like I say, first stage, get rid of the ideologues. Second stage, we'd move towards privatisation. I would stick this out there in the private sector. And I would do it in such a way as I would make sure that it would not be one of these absolute tosspots, the likes of the bloody Bloombergs or fucking Gores or any of those morons, they wouldn't get a slightest tentacle on there. I would go so far as to have government interference to make sure that it was owned by somebody that actually had a brain. Because apart from anything else, it's only going to be somebody that's got a brain that could actually make an operation like this work successfully. The profit margins obviously are not big enough. That's why you would end up with a very, very strict regime that would go in there to make it profitable and to actually make these people learn how to predict the weather correctly for the first time in their bleeding lives. So, a really annoying department. Not a good start to the programme, but hey ho, such is life. Like I say, I mean, the whole point of doing this kind of process is to actually tell the truth. There's no point everybody shouting about, oh, capitalism is bad, or this is bad and that is bad, when you don't actually know what the problems are. This is a problem. It's an evidential problem. It's a department that is telling lies. Gone. So, let's move into the next one. And the next one is multifaceted and also presents some issues. And this is the UK Space Agency. Now I'm going to be doing this over a few different slides because it represents a few different programs. And it's complex, as you would imagine, and does raise a lot of questions. Now, the first page that I'm going to go into is going to be able to be one of these ones where I can follow on from calling people pricks before I move into a much more sensible conversation. Because within this, I mean, as you can see from the Space Agency, and that there's 481 million spent. A lot of you are not going to be overly surprised to find out that a great deal of that money is actually sent out to Europe. Or if you didn't know that, well, you're soon going to find out. The actual UK Space Agency, such as it is, it really doesn't take up anything like the majority of the funds. But let's go step by step. So we'll begin with what's known as the UK Space Agency International Partnership Programme. This is the sort of shit that people need to be paying attention to, because whenever you have something that is got some sort of legitimate reason, legitimate purpose potentially, they will always sneak in some bullshit to siphon off some money. I don't know if I don't know what the name of the films are and that, but you'll see these. I think there's been a couple of films made in that where it probably is bollocks and that, where somebody will develop an algorithm and that, where they're literally taking a decimal point off any transaction, and then collectively around the world or around the country and whatever, and that actual decimal point, it's not generally noticed, but amounts to a very large amount of money. These bastards work in a very similar way. That when, obviously it's not decimal points though, and that these bastards take millions. They'll turn around and say, right, okay, there's a department there. It looks like on the face of it, it's got a very specific purpose. Everybody understands what a space agency is, but let's just put some bullshit in there that is kind of hidden from public view and where we can draw out a few million quid for ourselves. And that's what this fucking thing is. It's run by somebody called Christopher James Locke, who's, at least as far as I've determined thus far, he's got these 5 companies, of which one of them is a legitimate kind of company. I mean, it turns around within the Space Agency documents, it says that they're working together with something called Caribou Space, or Caribou Space, or however the fuck you're supposed to say it. There is no such company as Caribou Space. It is owned by this Caribou Digital, and that's where this bloody LOCKE fella comes into play. 3 of the companies, of the 5 that are listed in Companies House, if you remember last week when I said about Companies House, how you're supposed to investigate people, this is how you do it. The 5 different companies, 3 of them are literally, there's nothing to them. They barely exist, but they've been set up fairly recently, so that kind of suggests that there's going to be more bullshit at play. And when you've got all this crap about the Great Reset and so forth and that, then yeah, people are going to be setting up these little shell companies and organisation so they can just cream off a bit more and stick it in different locations to try to make things as complicated as possible, hoping that nobody will notice. Well, I have noticed, James, so, or Christopher, or whatever your name is, so go fuck yourself. Within his own bio, which is on this Caribou Digital, not Caribou Space, which doesn't exist, lo and behold, he's a digital ambassador for the UN Capital Development Fund. Well, isn't that a bloody shock? Wonder where he learnt his trade from. Somebody that pretends to be some digital bloody expert, and that's just because he's worked in a mobile phone company, gets picked up by these arseholes. And you'll notice as well that when, I don't know if anybody's done this yet themselves, but when you look into the United Nations and all the different it gets so irritating that you struggle to get your words out. When you look at the different tentacles of the United Nations, within there you will not find the UN Capital Development Fund. Wonder why that is. It's kind of like when people have these different foundations and so forth, which fortunately there is yet more links there. Because the main players within that Capital Development Fund of the United Nations, and that, like I said, because there's an awful lot of it will get fed through to that, because the amount of money that this prick is going to be getting from this program is not going into his companies, it's being fed through. They're taking a portion of it, but it's being fed through. So this is where things need to be paid attention to. And then from this UN CDF, it then ends up with their little, as per usual, little network, and that with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Ford Foundation, all this sort of stuff. But worse than that, and where I do think there is most definitely the relationship, and that based on what it is that they're trying to do, because they like to say that they're providing assistance to like farming in the fucking Sudan or something like that, and it's absolute bollocks, the whole lot of it, and it's got nothing to do with the bloody UK, and it's got nothing to do with the Space Agency. I mean, what some farmer is doing out in the bloody Sudan or in sodding Nigeria or whatever, now it's got fuck all to do with people like this. It's guaranteed. It's just one of these funneling off of money. They're not doing a damn thing for any country. But what they are doing, that it's all feeding into this better than cash alliance. And this is the problem that people keep being warned about, how they're going to be trying to get rid of cash and have this digital currency and push this Chinese style, oh Christ, I can't even remember what it's called now. Like there's this, the credit score system, and that way if you say the wrong thing, you get credits taken off your credit score, your personal credit score. You know, if you don't just comply with everything that these pricks say and do, you're not going to be entitled to buy your food this week or some shit like that. That's what these arseholes are up to, and they're feeding money off of the British taxpayer, and the fucking government are allowing this shit to happen. And they can't tell us that they don't know. That's the other thing about this. They cannot tell us that they don't know. Because if they don't know, why are they handing over 24 million in this past year to these people? If you don't know that you're handing off 24 million quid and you don't know where the fuck it's going, then you should be sacked for being an absolute spastic scumbag. Totally incompetent. There's no due diligence that's done by these people, and they just allow this sort of feeding off of the taxpayer. This is what socialism looks like. This is the socialism and the crony capitalism combined. That's what these people do, and they've got a single brain cell amongst a lot of them, and they're doing it all at everybody else's expense. Bastards would be gone in an absolute upbeat beat of a heart, gone. Walk through the door. The second I walk through the door, they're out of it. And the other part to this, and that can tell you even further to confirm exactly what I'm talking about, when you look at the documentation for this program, you get this shit. It's just all over the place. That United Nations sustainability goals. What the fuck has that got to do with anything? Absolutely bloody disgraceful. Stick your bloody sustainability goals up your arse. Can't stand these people. It gets more and more irritating every time I come across it. And that bloody Christopher James LOCKE and that, you should be ashamed of yourself. Can't stand these people. Right, so there's a program that within the Space Agency that should be got rid of immediately. And quite frankly, and that anybody that's having any involvement in that, or that's got some involvement with it and that, but it's basically not your fault, you need to be opening your mouths and saying what's really going on. And getting in touch with the government and saying, end this shit now. Don't wait for me to finish this program. Don't wait for me to finish the entire recreation of the Hoskyns wiring map. People, stand up and have some balls. And get rid of the crap before I have to do anything else. Before anybody has to do anything else. Because I'm guaranteed, if it doesn't work out that way and that the system change that is going to be coming as a result of it, you ain't going to fucking like it. Right, let's move on to a bit more sensible parts to things, within reason. So the next program that they're involved with is called the Sabre program. It's enough to make you go hot, isn't it, when you get a couple of departments and that can get you on a right rant and rave from the get-go. Anyway, right, so I might need to look at my notes a little bit more carefully from now on and that, because things become a little bit more sensible and I haven't written fuck all the time. Anyway, right, so the Sabre program. An air-breathing rocket engine that can propel an aircraft from 0 to 5 times the speed of sound in the atmosphere and 25 the speed of sound for space access. Is that a pretty bloody fast engine then? It's largely run by a company called Reaction Engines, but the program is done obviously in conjunction, as you'd expect, with Rolls-Royce. So the thing about this is, again, it becomes one of these questions as to whether this is something that government should be involved with. Is it the taxpayer obligation to fund this kind of thing? There'll be a few different areas around this within a couple of the few different programs that I do show today. The amount of money that this has had within the financial year, and obviously not the projects will end up being costing more than this, but like I said, I'm doing the accounts based on annual funds so that I can put all of that together and make sure that it does meet what the budget has been claimed to be, which I already know is wrong, but anyway. So 13 million for this type of project in the wider perspective, it's not an awful lot of money, especially when you consider what it is that they're looking to do. Now, there's a chance that I'm going to be saying the same thing on a couple of different occasions within this, but essentially what we're looking at here, and that is the cost-benefit analysis. Because if you look at how space is handled, I mean, most people understand that the big name in space is NASA. And NASA spend absolutely staggering amounts of money for doing, quite frankly, not an awful lot. And it's also another one of these organisations, fairly like the Met Office, has been overtaken by ideological dipshits. And then you have to think about the amount that NASA will spend compared to what SpaceX has achieved in the private sector, but also understanding that SpaceX is not pure private money. So I thought I had written down the actual amounts, but I obviously haven't. But it doesn't really matter. I mean, the amount of money that SpaceX will spend in order to send one flight up and actually be able to come back, which is and be reused, which is something that NASA never really did. I think it works out at something like around about, I actually think I'm being overly conservative here. I think it was about a fifth of the cost. I think it's much less than that even. But then we have to understand that, like I say, this is a debatable number of figures and that, but SpaceX gets between, the numbers that I've seen just offhand, without going into a deep dive on that, which is something that it becomes part of the RASIC, the much deeper dive that takes place later on. But they're getting anywhere between 5.5 billion to 16 billion, and maybe more, off of government funding, so taxpayer money. So it's not as if SpaceX is completely privately undertaken. So it is quite clear that anybody that is looking to be doing anything in terms of space, then the taxpayer is a critical part of it. That will become even more apparent as I'm going forward. But I mean, on the face of it, in terms of technological developments and what we actually want to be doing in terms of space, I mean, plainly, there aren't any private clients for this sort of thing. As much as they've had these programs to turn around and say, well, who can be the first privately run company to do space flights, that I think Virgin has been involved with in particular. And you just think, well, great. I mean, it'll cost people to, I mean, it literally would be a rich playboy's game, because each seat would cost an absolute fortune. The chances of it being something available to the wider public are very minimal. And quite frankly, being able to get onto a ship, just go into the outer atmosphere, float around for a bit, and then come back down, I mean, how pointless is that? Oh yes, somebody can turn around and go, oh yeah, take a photograph and look what I've been, put it on Facebook. But ultimately, I mean, it's a bit pointless. I think there's got to be much more credible reasoning behind this type of stuff, and there are legitimate reasons for doing it. But like I say, we'll look at that as we're going forward. But this is one program that gives you an idea of some of the sort of stuff that is taking place in the UK, and for that level of technology at this kind of annual cost, it's open for people to consider. You know, it depends what the wider public want. Oh well, there you go. I've forgotten I've got that. Okay, it's 1% of what NASA spends. I should really run these bloody pages before I actually start, shouldn't I? So yes, there's the answer to the question that I didn't think that I had written down. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. I don't think I've got any other little bits that are going to be popping up on this one. I hope not. I tend to forget shit. What can I say? I'm an old man. Anyway. Right, so the next one, where you're looking at a cost again. No, I mean, I find this one even more bizarre. At least currently, the cost to the taxpayer is the 12 million. Plainly, that would go flying through the roof if any of this really was to take off. But it's the space flight program, and this is where they're turning around and saying, well, we're going to have specific sites as around the UK as to which ones would be launched directly from a spaceport and which ones would be carrier aircraft launch pads. Yeah, you're not going to get that for 12 million quid, are you? But the other interesting part to this is that they've got some apparent facts and figures as to the size of the market and what have you. Because that is the one part that, in a proper consideration, a review and reform, which would generally be the recommendation for any department, it's them turning around and showing figures that I don't necessarily know that they make sense. So with this particular program, there's a couple of issues that I've got. Let's put it that way. So where you've got those three sites up at the top of the the map of Britain, and you'll notice they're all located in Scotland. That's something that would require some immediate consideration, because let's face it, if the Scottish Nationalist Socialist Racist Party get their own way, then they're no longer part of the United Kingdom, and why would we do anything to help them? You know, and if you want to break away in that and pretend to be Mel Gibson, that's up to you. I don't care. But for the UK taxpayer to be put in sites up in Scotland with that potential hanging over our heads, I think that is an absolutely ludicrous proposition. There's got to be some very serious considerations around risk for that. Not prepared to go forward on the current basis with something like that. They would have to be relocated until Scotland gave an absolute 100% guarantee that they were going to cut all of that crap out. If they don't want to be a part of the country, fine, fuck off. But don't expect us to be spending money putting infrastructure in place there. Harsh, but you know, you've got to be realistic about these things. Somebody asked the Scottish Racist Party how they would pay for something like that. See if you get an answer. Mind you, that from the laws that they're putting into place at the moment, and that if you did ask them a question like that, they'd send the police round, wouldn't they? Apparently, because that'd be hate speech. Twat. Anyway, the thing about all of the data that they turn around and say in terms of how much the market is worth and what the growth rates are and all this sort of stuff, again, I find it a bit of an unusual perspective for them to say these things, because, as I say, there is no private sector client. Now, if there is no private sector client, then that means the customer is the government, and also other governments. I mean, obviously, in that this is where they're trying to fob this off as being economically competent by saying that if we have this kind of infrastructure in place within the UK, and if we have this kind of technological development created within the UK, then you create a market for international customers, all of which would be basically governments, because then it's not going to be private, is it? You end up with the only part of space, because this is where things need to be divided a little bit, and there's between the satellites and what I would consider a proper space program. I do think those two things need to be separated quite clearly. Now, sending up the satellites and how much that's worth, again, an awful lot of this gets funded by the taxpayer. I never see any revenues appearing in the budgets and that to say, well, we're expecting to get this much money from the use of the satellites and that are then being used by all of the different mobile phone companies, etc., etc. I don't see the taxpayer getting the money back from the likes of, I mean, it's not just your mobile phones and that. I mean, you've got these people, whether it's your Microsofts, Amazons, all of your Googles, your big boys and that seem to think that they rule the world. They're using satellites paid for by taxpayers, and that's pretty much the same across the world. So where's the revenues from them people? Never mind your taxes. Where's your direct cost? Where's the direct revenues from those people using taxpayer-funded satellite systems? Areas like that need to be considered. So if you've got that satellite sector separated off and go, right, okay, where's the revenue stream for that? Then we look at the space as an independent from that and see, well, okay, how would that sector actually develop so that it would be generating revenue rather than feeding into this continual cycle of taxpayer money? Or what would be the end goal? This is the other part to things than that. What's the end goal where there would be legitimate revenue? And an awful lot of that, whether people like it or not, does tend to be the future vision of you're going out into space and into other planets. And I know somebody's going to try to compare me now to like something out of fucking Independence Day, you know, like a parasite or something like that. You're going out into space exploration not just for the fun of it and a great deal of taxpayer expense. You're going out there because you're going to be looking for resources. And this isn't the notion of saying, well, we need the resources from going out into space exploration because the Earth is going to be depleted. It's nothing like that. That's a nonsense conversation. It always goes way too far. The problem that you've got is twofold. Number one is there are some minor elements within the, like, I mean, the prime example of that is rare earth materials. It's called rare for a fucking reason. Are there materials out in space that you can come across that would then replace those supplies and ideally and potentially be more efficient? I mean, if you've got essentially a dead planet, does it really fucking matter? I would say it probably doesn't. So what would be the future benefit from that? These types of calculations need to be put in place. At some point, despite the fact that a lot of people don't seem to understand this, especially in the current situation where everybody seems to think that if anybody dies, it's the first time it's ever happened. Earth as a planet will die. It won't happen for a hell of a long time, and it sure as shit won't happen through climate change, but it will die. It's a planet. Any idiot that turns around and waves the flag saying save the world hasn't got a fucking clue what they're talking about. Planets die. They live, they die. Simple. So, at some point in the hugely distant future, yes, people will need to get onto spaceships or whatever the fuck it is and head off and go and live somewhere else. That is just a reality. So that would be one future benefit, that if you don't start making the preparations now, you won't be able to do it later. So there's one potential benefit. But because that is such a long way off, we have to be looking towards what would be the cost-benefit analysis for the taxpayer in the interim. Because it's quite plain that an awful lot of the planets that you'd be investigating for one hell of a long time to come are not going to be a replacement Earth. So certain areas around that need to be looked at. In addition, obviously, to making sure that the Scottish Racist Party don't get the benefit. So I'm not convinced by these numbers that they put up, because when the entire market is based on taxpayer money, including the private sector that is developing all these different technologies and the programs and all this sort of stuff, they're still being funded by the taxpayer, so they can't really call it a growth pattern when everything is still dependent on the taxpayer paying them. So it literally does run into this law of diminishing returns. You're not getting money out of the private sector for this. So you can't represent this as a growth pattern, because it just doesn't make logical sense. I think there needs to be a little bit more honesty around that sort of thing, and a little bit more honesty in terms of intentions, and a great deal more intelligence around what they're actually looking towards trying to achieve. And if the public can't handle the truth of something like that, you know, if you have to keep replaying Jack Nicholson saying you can't handle the truth, then just do it and let the idiots just get on with it. It's not our problem if they can't understand basic common sense. Right. This one the National Space Technology Programme. I'm actually surprised at how low this number is, the 4.5 million. I bet if I looked into that further than that, it would probably end up being more. But I'm just going with the annual reports, and like I say, everything that I say, including all the stuff around the wankers before, all the links are in the description. You can see everything for yourself. I'm not making anything up. Now, when it comes down to this kind of program, this is a little bit more along the lines of what I expected to see from BEIS, on account of having had some involvement with similar programs that I'll be able to explain when they come up. This is at the lower level of development. So as I showed you the Sabre program, this one is, say for example, the Sabre program at the moment is going through the development phase as to being able to manufacture and test that new kind of hyper engine effectively. That kind of technology is then moving kind of into the what's known as a manufacturing readiness level, which would then hopefully move into much more of what I would term from the private equity side as proof of concept, and also proof of business. But I'm going to run through this quite quickly, if I can, just to give you some idea, because this stage is what is known as the TRLs. You can see that on the far graph and that, where it says raised TRL levels. Right, the TRLs is what you want to be interested in at this point. TRL, technical readiness level, that is effectively what you would establish as a kind of like it's a first stage of proof of concept. And what I mean by that is that you've gone from an idea and then you're looking towards being able to put those component parts together to see if that idea is actually feasible. So yeah, feasibility is kind of like the area that we're talking at. I'm going to need some more whiskey. It does come at a number of different levels. Maybe later on I will give the map as to what the full extent of TRLs and MRLs are. I think there's, if I remember rightly, which I've probably got it wrong, I think there's something like about 13 or 14 levels. Might not be the exact same for each one, I can't remember offhand. But there is a very specific process laid out as to what constitutes a technical readiness level, then what constitutes the manufacturing readiness level, like I say. So that's kind of where you are with the Sabre program. With the, well, I don't think you are actually. So I think it's a combination of TRL and MRL for the Sabre one. I'm not convinced that they've actually done a test that proves that it can achieve the things that they say it does, but say it can. But anyway, it's further, it's more advanced, put it that way. So this is dealing with the lower level, the idea to a bit of progression as far as that's concerned. I do kind of understand how this has relevance. Whether it should be funded by the taxpayer again becomes a bit of a question. Because once you go past the manufacturing readiness level, then you've got something that's called the SCRL. Not included on here, and that because it's too advanced for this stage. An SCRL is called the supply chain readiness level. And the reason why you've got that is because as much as you can develop a particular item and say, right, okay, I've created this particular product, therefore you can recreate it and it can go out to the market. Not necessarily so. When you come down to be able to, if you've got some, so for example, I mean, it depends on a lot of different products. If you're putting something that's out in mass manufacturing, then you have to have all of the different casts. You have to make sure that the production line is set up and that it can replicate that product precisely each and every time. And so once it comes off the end of that manufacturing line, you have got identical products, and that helps with your quality process, reliability, things of this nature. Having the process set in place to make sure that you've got the right kind of, whether that's a manufacturing partner or whether you can set up a manufacturing line yourself, understanding what the costs of that are going to be, what the supply chain to that is going to be. So even when you're setting up a manufacturing line, you're still buying the equipment to come in and make sure that it can actually achieve the things that you want it to achieve. Where are you going to get the casts made? You know, where are your belts going to be made on the overhead cranes? There's a whole range of different considerations. So understanding that supply chain, whether that be the supply that you are creating for yourself, and then still having suppliers bring in, because it's not as if you're creating the entire thing. You don't have all materials you're ready made for yourself. So you need to be checking to make sure that those partners can supply at a consistent level. Because if you don't and you end up with a break in your manufacturing line, then you end up being well, essentially you end up being incompetent, unreliable. The products won't be consistent and you will fail. It doesn't matter how good the product is. If you can't get that consistency and you can't get the reliability, you will fail. It's as simple as that. So having something like a supply chain readiness level is quite a critical part to it. I mean, I do understand these things. There's just certain elements that I would add within it. There is another part to this which is a little bit less well known, and I will give a little bit of a follow-up as well. That the supply chain readiness levels, in terms of the Space Agency itself, I would say that the most advanced company for competent supply chain readiness levels is Rolls-Royce. Most organisations are still lagging in terms of being able to fulfil the criteria around this, but Rolls-Royce are exceptionally good, and they've been in development of it. I mean, I would actually say that they're probably one of the foremost companies for having developed this particular process themselves. They are exceptionally good along these lines. This is why you end up with, say for example, Jaguar Land Rover. They might not forgive me for saying this, but ho hum. Jaguar Land Rover, obviously, again, when it comes down to automotive vehicles, you have to be so consistent if you're going to be a volume producer. One of the criteria to become a supplier to JLR, now this isn't, there are certain methods of exception here, but as a base rule, if you're not showing I'm pretty sure it's at least a revenue level of around about 3 million. So this is why very small companies, you've got no chance really of being a supplier to somebody like Jaguar Land Rover. Unless you've got that consistent revenue stream over a given number of years, around about 3 million, you're not going to be a part of the supply chain. And the reason for that, harsh as that may seem, it's because they need that reliability, they need that consistency, they need to know that if they've started a program for developing a new vehicle, which historically has been something like around about 4 to 5 years and that for development. I understand that with the this electric vehicle cycle, because they're also fucking boring and unreliable anyway, I think that's designed to end product cycle has now been reduced to something like around about 2.5 years, 2.5 years. That's for another day. If you can't supply consistently during that design process and the readiness level process, and then come out the other end and then know that they can sell that vehicle for, say for example, 10-15 years, if you can't be there by their side for that entire period of time, you can't get chosen. It's a matter of competence, it's a matter of consistency, it's a matter of protecting yourselves and your end customers. So these are the kind of considerations that make up part of the supply chain readiness level at a slightly higher level. But anyway, in addition to that, there are ones that are a little bit less well known. I think there's a couple of different names for this, as they generally tend to be. But the one that I'm familiar with is the circular value chain readiness level. And essentially, as much as I don't like an awful lot of the stuff that gets wrapped around this, because you do end up with all of these, as per usual, the socialist fucking idiots and that, and the climate change bollocks, I prefer to look at it as something that I've become more familiar with in terms of the Japanese market, whereby the Japanese nation doesn't have an abundance of its own resources, minerals and so forth. And so that means that they have a level of dependency on other nations. Now, in order to make best use of the materials that they gain from outsourced solutions, they developed almost immediately this mentality of recycling. And that's pretty much across the board. It doesn't really matter what the product line is, and it's done in a very efficient way. It's something that I found it quite amusing, and that when you see things like in the UK and that, and they talk about recycling and that as if they've just reinvented the wheel or something, and that, and I look at them and I think, just go to Japan. They've been doing it for years, for Christ's sake. But anyway, this circular value chain readiness level, if it's done on a sensible way, in terms of what can you recycle, what can you reuse, what can you be utilising one sector first and then use in another sector afterwards. So for example, that if you've got a particular grade of steel, that once it's got to the end of its life there, then you can end up with a downgraded level of steel, but it's still suitable for another particular product line or sector. So it's being able to understand how that entire, as they say, value chain, how that all can work together. I do think that still an awful lot of the organisations in various parts of the world have just really not got that concept together correctly, and they certainly don't seem to be able to understand how to do it profitably, and that one messes with my head a little bit. But then also within that, you've got to have levels of understanding as to what cannot fit within that value chain as well. And so essentially I'm going all through this and that because I want you to understand the types of programs that are affiliated with this particular stage and how it then develops up into the other higher echelons of how the process runs. There's, like I say, you can have a look and see all the various little graphs and little bits and pieces of how they consider it to be taken forward. For me personally, when it comes down to this kind of thing, it doesn't give enough room for SMEs to be involved still. They'll often claim that it is SME centric, and I don't think it is. It's highly dependent on very large organisations, but then again, in terms of this particular part of things with the Space Agency, I can kind of understand that. You're talking about space programs, for Christ's sake. It's not like you're building a fucking model railway or something like that. And as I say, there is no private sector as it stands to be funding this stuff, because there's no revenue model. So I do think that on one side of things there needs to be a bit of a realisation where you have the sector breakdowns as to who's actually going to be dominant within it. Obviously Rolls-Royce is going to be huge in this sector, And I also think there always has to be a great deal of preference towards domestic companies. Now, I know that ends up being this long, consistent fight that we've had with the European Union, and I'll come to them a little bit later on. But it should just be a matter of fact that, especially because this particular agency is domestic only, or should be, then is it called grace and favour, whatever it's called, is handed to domestic companies above all else. And so it should be for SMEs. If the larger organisations are struggling to find a need within the supply chain, then I don't necessarily have a problem with the government turning around and first and foremost giving an announcement to say, well, private sector, step up to the plate. There is a need here. There is a very specific need here. You could fulfil that. Get off your backsides, invest where it's needed. So that's where conversations between government and the private sector and that could actually be a benefit. But within all of this, because I know that even within this particular programme and also within all similar types of programmes that are run within the UK, there are two basic problems. And that is a failure to understand proof of concept and proof of business. Now, proof of concept and proof of business is something that is often undertaken within the due diligence process of the private equity markets. It's often combined with other things such as who are the individuals involved in the company, are they competent, and all the rest of it. But your primary point of focus is the proof of concept and proof of business. So proof of concept is going to cover your TRLs and your MRLs. Latter stage of your SCRLs as well. But is it something that is a genuine idea, does present potential, and does have some logical competence behind it? Does it have the right business plan behind it? Does the product, service, etc. meet a market need? Then when you're moving into proof of business, you're looking towards making sure that it is going to be a standalone prospect. There's where I have an awful lot of problems, and that will be much more focused towards the space agencies. Like I say, this is where we need to have that look as to what it is that we're actually looking to achieve in the long term. I've got no problem with long-term scenarios, and I mean, and when I say long-term in this instance, I'm talking maybe 100 years or more, if need be. But unless you've got that specific understanding, that vision, that plan to say, right, within this particular number of given years, so for a standard business plan, you're looking at anywhere between 3, 5, 7 years. Something like this, yes, you could be looking to 100 years in the future. I don't know. That's this particular area, and that would require much more of a deep dive by myself. But unless you've got some perspective to say, right, we've gone through all of these processes in order for this to show it can stand on its own 2 feet. If you haven't gone through those processes correctly, then you're not doing things right. Nothing should ever be taxpayer dependent. Once you've gone through all of the processes, there should be no taxpayer dependency. That's where these types of programs always fail, as far as I'm concerned. And this is where the private equity due diligence processes need to be translated into government funding programs, because they don't understand that basic concept. And which is why within these funding programs and within the European ones, which are called Horizon 2020, that's why you've got this thing called the Valley of Death, because predominantly that ends up being between academia and industry. They don't understand what those processes are by any formal measure whatsoever. That's why they speak different languages, because they just don't understand how to be able to communicate that amongst themselves. We need competent people in here that can actually stipulate, this is the program, this is the requirement, this is what we need to actually, these are the processes we need to conduct in order to be able to achieve these levels. That's what's missing. In the initial phases, would that mean that we end up with less programs? Probably. In the longer term, would it create a far greater cost-benefit analysis? Hell yes. So I want people to understand how these types of programs are run. Like I say, with this particular one, the 4.5 million, I'm dubious as to whether that's a reliable number, but that's what it's got written down in the annual report. So that's the number I shall use. Like I said, there are a number of different programs around this. So anyway, something for you to understand. Again, further stages of how government currently works. Now this one, I've done this one in a slightly different way, and that because whether people know this or not, we've got all your Brexiteers out there going, oh yeah, great, we're out of Europe, we're now just waiting for Boris to stop faffing around with his continual, I will not move from this particular date, and then do exactly that 5 minutes later, because he ain't going to deliver jack shit, put it that way. As you can see, the larger amount of money that is allocated to this particular agency is going out to Europe still, and will continue to do so for at least 5 years and probably beyond. So when people are turning around saying we've now cut all our links to the European Union, no, we haven't. It's an outright lie. Now there are a number of different projects again within the European Union, the European Space Agency. A great deal of it falls along similar lines to what I've already explained. And soon as I started off with the Space Agency, the UK version of a bunch of tossers, I've decided to go with a similar bunch of tossers that are front and centre when you look at the European Space Agency's website, where they've got the article up there, and that's a space to help build a green post-pandemic economy. What the fucking hell are you people talking about? Nothing to do with what they're supposed to be doing. So let's have a little bit of a look as to what was behind that particular article. Well, we can find that that particular promotion is something that was been pushed by the World Wild Fund, which is basically just yet more bullshit, and that fairly similar to our WWF, headed by, and actually it was started by Prince Philip and whatever his name is out of Holland, which ends up being a land grab out in Africa. It's got nothing to do with wildlife, and it's also responsible for murders and abuse out in Africa as well, but we'll leave that for the moment. It's also got comments by something called the Mercury, I presume that's how you pronounce it, Foundation. So I thought, well, okay, well, who the bloody hell are they? Because as per usual, you end up with all these different foundations all over the sodding place. As I pointed out with our case, and that all fed through to the Bill and Melinda Gates, the Ford Foundation and so forth. So now we get this one. Well, basically this is a Portuguese fella. And he started and made his money from something called High Fly, I think it was called, which is a private jet organisation, which, yeah, fair enough, if that's what you want to do. Don't have a problem with that. What I do have a problem with is that he's obviously somebody that has got to a certain stage where, and this is something I've been explaining outside of this particular forum, certain individuals that reach a particular level of standing, wealth, etc., etc., they end up in a scenario where you got a few different shitbags generally that will come knocking on your door, and quite consistently lately, because of the absolute trash that is coming out of the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. You'll have these, you'll have the certain types of people that are absolutely determined to push a message to those that they can grab a hold of, largely to be able to get their hands on their money and their influence, their access and their promotions, etc., etc. In this instance, it seems very much like Warren Buffett, because Warren Buffett was somebody that I used to actually quite admire, not so much anymore, since he's decided to become a bit of a mentor to Bill Gates in all the wrong ways and take up the old Rockefeller's dubious elements, before, you know, when he'd shifted from being just a regular businessman and that to becoming a complete tosser. Well, it seems like this fella has been infiltrated by all of this bullshit, and it's ended up making him a lot of money, because, again, I mean, what better person can you have to talk about a green economy than somebody who, under the influence of Warren Buffett, has been heavily involved in all manner of different areas of the aircraft industry, and then investments from Alstom, Amazon, American Express, Apple, Chevron, Cisco, Coca-Cola, Credit Suisse, ExxonMobil, Galp, Energica, General Electric, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Merck, Microsoft, Pfizer, Verizon, Walt Disney. Don't fucking lecture about green economies when you've been playing around with that shit. If you've been playing with companies like that, quite frankly, you deserve to be called a hypocrite. And you deserve to be called out for being a complete tosser that needs to shut your fucking mouth when it comes down to green post-pandemic poxy economy, which is essentially just fucking socialism, and you know it. Your bum chum Warren might have given you a little bit of a hand job and made you think that you were all wonderful and part of the latest crew, but these people have no good intentions for you, you dumb bastard. Essentially what this daft bugger is going to end up doing is, I mean, I'll go a little bit easy on him, because there are certain elements of investigation that has been information kindly provided to me, thank you, you know who I'm talking to, around certain areas of what he's been up to and certain legal battles that he's involved with. I won't go too much into that at this point, but what I will turn around and say is that he seems to be playing a bit of a fine line, this guy. And as much as everybody might be thinking, well, what the fuck has all this got to do with the Space Agency? Well, you know, when this sort of stuff is infiltrating all these different departments, it matters, especially when we're putting fucking money into it, because it will then get fed through to things like these foundations, and then those foundations just basically just a money laundering operation for the arseholes, the likes of the Buffetts and fucking Bloombergs and what have you, and then through to the likes of Adolf Schwab. That's why it's a problem. This fella, on the other hand, presents a slightly unusual scenario, because anybody that doesn't understand this is that there is going to be an election in Portugal. I think it's next year in January, I was told, if I remember rightly. And this guy has had some association with a party out in Portugal called Chega, C-H-E-G-A. Now, that particular party is what is going to be lambasted everywhere as a populist party. I've already seen the stuff out there to say that the guy that's running it, I think was his name Ventura, something like that, he's been linked with the far right and he's a fucking neo-Nazi and all the standard bullshit that you get when you've got a party that is actually a potential threat and is not prepared to toe the line. This fella has actually had a small measure of, I would say, he's been spotted, put it that way, appearing at certain lunches that have been put together by this party, so that it looks like that there might be some association that he's got with these people. I would say that that means that there's a little bit of hope that he does actually have some remaining level of understanding as to what it is that he's getting involved with. Maybe it's going to get to the stage where he's made the mistake, he's got involved in all this sort of stuff, he's come to understand what the real parasites look like and the socialist arseholes, and he thought, right, I need to be going to speak to some regular people, some of the ones that they're called populists, because remember, us Brexiteers were called populists. We're not. We are popular, hence that's why we won. We know that leftists don't like that, because there's nothing that they do that is popular, so they have to try to belittle the term. Trump, who better win next week, America. He's another one that's been called far right and all the rest of it, and it's just utter bollocks, spewed by the liars, and predominantly liars who, whether they will admit to it or not, of course they won't, but their ideology has got far, far more to do with the far right than anything that those that they accuse of have got anything to do with. I think that made sense. When you've got these people that are falling behind all these corporate socialist corporations and corporatism, and falling behind this agenda of the likes of Mr. Adolf Schwab, where do you think they got their money from? I think there was a fair few gold teeth that got pulled out for that sort of shit. The mild hope is that this fella will actually come to his senses. He might actually see somebody, and then one day he might turn around and stop having articles in his name being put front and centre in the fucking UK Space Agency. Because as far as I'm concerned, again, if you've got proper plans for UK Space Agency, it should not involve the European one. You can have crossovers in terms of business. You can have crossovers in terms of best use of intellectual property, but it should not be requiring 334 million of our taxpayer money to fund what they're doing. So, very much broad strokes of what the UK Space Agency looks like at the moment. Areas where it quite clearly needs review, reform, certain parts removed, surgically removed, then held up and waved around to say, fuck off. When you actually look into government, you'd be surprised what you find. So, next one, ACAS. ACAS is a department that I do see a benefit for having. I don't care if it costs the 50 million. When it comes down to things like your regular employment tribunals, people being able to stand up for themselves in legitimate cases, and so that they don't end up with massive bills at the end of it, because especially in the UK, and that since they removed things like the oh Christ, what's it called? Anybody? Bueller? Well, basically, the legal fees that you used to be able to be entitled to, that you're not anymore. Things like this kind of make up the difference a little bit, not enough, but a bit. So you can actually go to tribunals and that and see if there are certain elements of unfair dismissal or levels of wrongdoing during work practices, things of this nature. I can understand how that makes sense. However, once again, I mean, first and foremost, I mean, so if we look at the year in numbers that we've got there, where they've got one of their highlights as how many followers we've got on Twitter and Facebook. I mean, who gives a shit? I mean, seriously, that's really not something that should be atop of your agenda. That's not a highlight. That really is not a highlight. Concentrate on your fucking job. The bigger problem that I've got with this is how we can see below the lower graphic how they're running events, gender identity in the workplace. Here's where they've gone from being assistance to legitimate causes of grievance and tribunals and so forth, and that are not then going to be costing the earth to an employee that would otherwise be unable to take action. Here we're going into postmodernist lefty bollocks. Gender identity in the workplace. Who gives a shit? You go into work to do a fucking job. If a company is being now told that they've suddenly got to change everything that they're doing based on whether somebody walks through the door and that is claiming to be one sex or the other, or any 500 that they've just made up yesterday, is not the company's problem. That's the individual's mental problem. That sort of shit needs to stop. I've got absolutely no patience whatsoever with all of this bullshit of somebody turning around claiming to be a fucking mermaid. Couldn't give a shit. Do what you want in your own time. It's got nothing to do with where you work. Do your job. Shut your fucking mouth. Not interested in this. But it gets much worse. Because whilst I've not had room to do this, I mean, they've got that one programme that's currently on the website and that around the gender identity. They've got a whole raft of different programmes and events to talk about mental health. Again, you're pushing stuff onto companies that is not their company's responsibility. It's the individual's responsibility. And it becomes the individual's responsibility because mental health has gone literally mental. The amount of people that are claiming mental health issues with this and mental health issues with that has just gone completely out of whack. It's all part of this victimhood shit. If you truly have a proper mental health problem, first and foremost, it depends how far that is. I mean, for example, if you're a fucking psychopath, no, we don't want to employ you. As simple as that. Get yourself in a fucking padded cell with a bloody white coat on and fuck off. No. Don't want it. But all of this stuff about I've got mental, I'm stressed. Oh, I can't cope today because of this. And, oh, and it's my time of the month and I can't cope. Fucking grow up. I mean, seriously, just fucking grow up. That's half of the problem of where we're going wrong with so many different things, and that is just so many people that just want to make as many excuses as they possibly can so they don't have to actually do anything. That's what it boils down to. I mean, when you've got real people that have got genuine problems, I mean, the one prime example of this is the guys that have come out of the military, and they got like I say, I mean, they've got, you have to have your several thousand different names for it these days, and then everybody else can jump on the bandwagon. But the genuine ones, the ones that have got what used to be called shell shock, there are certain positions and certain things that can be done to be able to assist those guys that have got a genuine perspective as to why they've got a problem. People that have actually been out there and see some real atrocities. those are the guys that you take some fucking sympathy for, and you make sure that there's whatever it is that whatever role it is that they're undertaking, you make sure that it's not going to be something that is going to be setting them off or pushing them in a direction where it's going to just reignite those memories. You can also say that it's potentially similar lines to, I mean, Christ, how many girls are there up in fucking Rotherham and places up in the north and that are just consistently being ignored now because you might be racist. Because being called racist is apparently worse than if you've just been gangbanged. People like that, that's where you've got some genuine concerns. And turn around and go, right, let's make sure that we know what it is that's actually happened and make sure that there isn't something that can spark off something. But for the vast majority of this, I don't feel like it. Oh, somebody said something I don't like. Fuck off. Get a proper definition of what mental health actually means. Target if there's any resources to be targeted toward this sort of thing, make sure it's targeted to actual genuine cases, not fucking wimps. That's where a lot of these programs end up being wrong, because it's just continuously pandering to this widening scale of victimhood that doesn't fucking exist amongst the vast majority of them. And I do include women, and I will be fucking controversial about this, and I don't give a shit. If you've got a period and you end up being an arsey cow every month, that's your fucking problem. It's not everybody else's problem. And that's not a mental health condition. Next part that is bad about ACAS. They've turned around and they're promoting this Black History Month. I mean, why anybody is promoting a Black History Month is fucking beyond me. For what purpose? When we're supposed to have been moving towards this skin doesn't matter. The skin colour doesn't matter. Why do you need to promote things to make it matter? Why? Again, it's causing division. It's not solving it, it's causing it. It's creating more divisive perspectives of people. And this sort of shit helps promote that. That's why you do get quite often that the people go, alright, then where's White History Month? Where's Yellow History Month? Well, I'm sure somebody will complain and say, I'm not yellow. Where's Brown History Month? If the fucking Martians land, where's Green History Month? You know, piss off, really. Why can't people just be put forward in terms of their achievements? There's some of the most brilliant thinkers at the moment include the likes of Thomas Sowell. What's it, Larry Elder? Brilliant fellas. Are they right 100% of the time? Probably not. Does it matter? No. Because nobody is. Does it matter that they're black? Of course it fucking doesn't. It's what they think, it's what they can actually achieve, it's what they do, it's who they are as an individual. This sort of stuff, oh, and if you want to create race hatred, if you want to go, I mean, fairly obviously, and that the lefty lunatics, and especially the twats up in Scotland, I mean, they're absolutely determined to create race division. They're absolutely determined to make sure that we all hate each other now. And they actually want to go back to fucking days of apartheid and actually claim that as being a good thing. Fucking retards. This sort of nonsense has got to stop. It has literally got to stop. And again, here's the other part, and this is the worst part of it. And it's not just with ACAS, but I come across this because of looking at ACAS. They are paying a membership fee to an organisation called the Employers Network for Equality and Inclusion. So when we had that MP up at the dispatch box the other week, was it Kemi Baden Dock or whatever the fucking name was, turned around saying it's all of this critical race theory and all this sort of stuff, it's all illegal. It's not, because I'll put the link in the description. The amount of government departments that are paying membership fees to these bastards, and that, well, there's what the membership fees are. And also, I thought I'd just remind everybody in that who else they're associated with, which is the Open Society Foundation, Mr. Soros, shocker. This is where all of that bullshit training comes from. So basically, that what you've had from that MP was a barefaced lie to say it's all illegal. We will not have it in our government. Well, no, because you're outsourcing it to somebody else and having them coming in and training everybody in all of this leftist fucking postmodernist bullshit. You fucking liar. All of these organisations need to be weeded out. So that's them, and that last week, was it the Stonewall Equality? They're the ones that are coming in and pushing this agenda, and the government, the taxpayer, are paying for it. Again, it's paying for your own demise, and that across all people. Doesn't matter what your fucking race is or whether you're a bloody mermaid or not. You're paying for your own demise when you have bastards like this coming in and pushing their fucked up ideology. This is just, like I said, ACAS as an organisation, I see the purpose of it, but the way that they are allowing this kind of crap, and like I say, well, I can't just pick on ACAS, because when you do click on the link in the description for this poxy other organisation, you see how many government departments are paying this membership fee out of our money. Fuck them. That shit needs to be stopped immediately. And the bloody MPs need to stop going up to the dispatch box and outright lying, because that's what they're doing. Never mind fucking Corbyn with his bloody anti-Semitism. Yeah, by all means. I mean, that man should never have been in Parliament in the first bloody place. But when you got people that are just outright lying to your face, when you got Conservatives that are just, they're nothing remotely like Conservative. That ship sailed after Maggie Thatcher. They've not been Conservative since then. The moment that John Major signed 1992 at the was it the Rio Convention or what it was, and then he signed us up to Agenda 21. The Conservative Party have been socialists ever since, and bollocks to them. I'm not going to put up with any more of their lies. That's why we need parties like the Lawrence Fox one, the oh Christ, I can't remember what they're called now, Reclaim Party, and then this other one, the Heritage Party. That's why we need parties like that now. Forget the Brexit Party, because like I say, Nigel Farage bottled it, and he's shown that he's not capable of having more than one agenda at a time. We need people that can actually understand this sort of shit and get rid of it. And the wider public need to start opening your mouths. And across other countries as well. Like I said, when I keep saying to people in other countries, have a look and see what your government is doing. Have a look and see what kind of relationships your different government departments have got. Where is all of this shit feeding in? Because if you don't know how it's being fed in, you're not going to know how to be able to extract it. So, yeah. Fucking outrageous. I don't like it when they lie like this. Right, so the update as to where we stand at the moment in terms of the department as a whole. Looking through all of the different departments that I've checked thus far, I know there's something like 49 of them in total, so there's plenty more to come. Where we stand at the moment is that, taking out the core department again, I have to keep explaining this. They say that they spend 3 billion, something like that, so we're looking for a total of 10 billion. Because of the departments that have been net contributors, what we stand at the moment is 525 million in terms of cost to the taxpayer. So the net contributors plus the departments that are just purely paid for by the taxpayer, this is where we stand at the moment. As much as that may not seem too bad, like I say, there's a lot more departments to come. I wouldn't be surprised if we go beyond that 10 billion, but that's the check that needs to be made. Okay, so that's where we stand as far as this department is concerned. Policy developments, and a little thank you to Christina for pointing out that I can actually put some over to other lines that basically say the exact same thing, only to a point, because I have to end up not making sure I've got enough room for my own ugly mug as well. So the review and reform goes to the UK Space Agency and also to ACAS. I'm adding at the bottom the possible sale of the Met Office, because it will go through those couple of phases where it's a case of, let's get rid of all of the ideologues to begin with, take a look and see what kind of sales proposition there is in reality, and then if it doesn't present a prospective sale, then what I would do with that is literally just shut the whole thing down, because there are private weather services, and let's face it, that's what we want from the Met Office. We don't want all of their political rhetoric and bullshit. We just want to know what the fucking weather is. There's a whole bunch of private firms that's, I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever watched Formula One, and that's not done through the Met, and they can literally pinpoint down to almost a second as to when it's going to rain, when the first drop of rain is going to appear. Now, in terms of their long-term forecast capabilities concerned, let them take it out to the private sector. You know, let them expand on that private sector. Let them be the competitor. Let them be the ones that say, right, this is what we think the weather is going to be. Because that's all anybody wants from it. We don't need to be paying for these ideological wankers. So if we can make some money out of a sale, do it. So that takes us through to this one.
Fuck off! You are, you cheeky fucking swat!
It has been a very sweary episode so far, hasn't it? But that's why I put the warning up at the beginning. So, in terms of FOWEFUN and the United Nations, as soon as I had a go at the Met Office, I thought, let's have a look at the World Meteorological Organization. And whilst this is not run by a communist, you'll be surprised to learn, it's actually run by a Finnish guy. And the thing about the Finnish guy here is that, well, I mean, I'll give one quick shout out to Finland, because from what I understand from developments in the European Union, they've actually suggested they might be about to put forward a referendum as to whether they want to remain in the European Union. I'm sure they're probably looking at Sweden and thinking, apart from all of the grenade throwing and the no-go areas, if we can bypass that part of it, there might actually be something to take forward there. But so good up to Finland for at least the step of consideration. It'd be much better if you can do better than your little muppet that's gone into the United Nations and actually fulfill the promise. And the reason why this fella is a muppet, even though he's a professor, I couldn't give a shit. Petri Talas, whatever. Ass being operative word there. He did at one point put his head above the parapet, as you can see from the bit of information that's there, and he actually did turn around and say there's far too much doom and gloom, no shit Sherlock, in terms of all of the climatard nonsense. And he did that on September the 6th of 2019, at a point where I think it was quite obvious that, I mean, there was an awful lot of reports and actual proper science being published at that point that was shining a very distinct light on how much bullshit that agenda is based on. But he gets the chicken shit award because it took him a week to then roll back and just fall in line with the UN's agenda and go, oh no, it's all right. The world is going to end, actually. I mean, what sort of fucking idiot do you have to be to do that? So, whereas we normally have a demonstration of a communist and a socialist within the United Nations, what we've got here is just a basic wuss. That if you can't have the courage of your conviction, you can't state a simple fact without being browbeaten by ideologues and morons, that makes you a wuss. And once again, does rather bring to the fore the Allodoxaphobia aspect. So, if this guy ever did, massively unlikely, come across this particular little bit of YouTube, grow some balls, mate, because you clearly haven't got any. So that'll do for the World Meteorological Organization. Like I say, when I come down to break down the UN and the World Economic Forum at the same level that I'm doing with the government, then I'll go into more detail as to exactly how much bollocks these people are producing. Just going to concentrate on the individual there. Oh, and I forgot to black out that box. Never mind. So, World Economic Forum. Seeing as the United Nations didn't present a communist Chinese criminal, I thought, well, let's have a look at some of the communists that are in the World Economic Forum. And let's go with the China Communications Construction Company, of which they have a number of different subsidiaries. Notable ones are John Holland out of Australia and Fried and Goldman based out in the US. Now, the funniest part of this is, remember that there is an actual operating agreement, a signed agreement, which I have a copy of, and if anybody wants to see a link to it and that, just let me know and I'll put it up. There's a signed agreement between the United Nations and the World Economic Forum in terms of this Agenda 2030 and now the Great Reset, so they can have several different names and claim that they don't exist. Within that cooperation of socialism and corporatism, trademark Scotty, this particular bunch of commies, because it is owned by the state, have been so bad that even the United Nations little tentacle, the World Bank, had to put an embargo on them and stop them from being involved in projects, which they did it in 2011, but did it retrospectively, which is a bit pointless. It's too fucking late then. So between 2011 and 2017, they were not allowed to take part in projects. And this was because of levels of fraud in the Philippines. I mean, it's absolutely farcical. I mean, within the links in the description on this one, I've used one resource, which comes out of Burma. And the reason why I've chosen that one is because it lists all these different things, whereas the highlights that I've got here are based on project-specific levels of criminality. Because you have to remember with this lot, these are the ones that are pushing this Belt and Road Initiative, the one that nobody really speaks of with any level of consistency or anything remotely like you would expect from media scrutiny. To be able to say, look at all of the shit these Chinese bastards are doing all around the world. Because they don't do anything. I mean, again, you have to take it back to the United Nations and the level of fraud that the United Nations have been responsible for, and they've taught these people how to do this stuff. So, I mean, whether it is World Economic Forum or the United Nations, all you need to know between the two of them is it means fraud. It means criminality. Often it means outright fucking murder. And I'll come to that with some of the other members later on. But with this one, I say, the John Holland and that, and fined $130,000 in Australia over work safety. The Tanzania Ports Authority. Fraud again, bloated contract, 523 million. Railway workers, that one, I can't remember where that was based in. Bangladesh, I think that one was. Oh no, sorry, this one's Bangladesh. And the Chinese harbour. Where was that one? I can't remember where that one was. But anyway, there's just a long list of criminality by these Chinese government-owned organisations that are members of the World Economic Forum. So when you've got the World Economic Forum turning around and saying that we are the bastions of truth and we're going to be pushing forward with this agenda together with the United Nations to say how wonderful we are and how you should really do all of the things that we say. No. Clearly, no. I mean, these people have no integrity whatsoever. It's just phenomenal how many governments around the world are paying lip service and giving, not as I've pointed out in that with the Space Agency program, as I pointed out with the those wankers that are associated with ACAS and several other government departments, all of that shit that is being fed in and they're sucking money out of the taxpayer, all to go towards shit like this. What point does somebody need to actually have a brain fart and think, no way, why would I listen to any of you? I'm not interested in your agenda. I'm not interested in your criminality. I'm not interested in your little bum chum pals and that and the way that you work things out to be able to rip everybody else off. I'm not interested in your fraud. I'm not interested in your mistreatment of the people, the ones that you keep claiming that you're going to be building this better world for. Because you don't give, in reality, you don't give a shit about anybody but yourselves. And it literally is as simple as that. And I will say it each and every single time that I do this, because I'm going to pick up on more and more of these Chinese buggers that are involved in the World Economic Forum. And when you've got that bloody Jabba the Hutt looking twat Adolf Schwab sat there with his Great Reset launch and big ears Prince Charles, the dipshit bloody moron that he is, with no fucking clue what he's talking about because he only ever talks to plants, because nobody else is going to talk to the bloody inbred moron. When you've got idiots like that pushing all of the shit that we've got going on at the moment. Well, actually, I've got some more details and I shouldn't have put that away. Here we go, yeah. When they're pushing all this shit, I mean, when does the wider public grab a brain and say, I don't think so? Write to your MPs and point out the sort of stuff that I'm demonstrating here. And they are all facts. It's all, you can check all of it. I'm not fucking Alex Jones. I don't need Joe Rogan to say, hang on a minute, because I've got the shit in front of me. I've got the links to it already. At what point do people turn around and go, right, enough's enough. We can't tolerate this. There are better ways of doing things. We understand that there are methods of running countries where we can look after the people that need to be looked after. We can let the private sector do what they need to do. We can develop effectively, efficiently, and bring people up to a better standard of living. You will inevitably end up with peaks and troughs. That's the real world. But what you can't do is be dictated to with idiot programs run by morons that clearly could not give a flying fuck about anything apart from their inbred, mental, retard, web feet, fucking idiot ideologies. And that includes all of you pricks out there and that think you're being fucking clever with your Black Lives Matter and your fucking anti-fa and, oh, capitalism is the worst thing in the world. You've got no clue what you're talking about. Not a single fucking clue. I'm sick of the retards. Pay attention. Get a fucking clue as to what's going on and understand who it is that is actually the arsehole here. Because I guarantee that little fat fuck Jabba the Hutt Adol Schwab is sitting on a pile of gold that came from 1945. There's a reason why he sounds like the way he does. And it's not just because he's fucking German. Careful what you wish for, people. Because when the shit hits the fan, you want somebody that's actually going to be turning around and saying, right, what are the actual problems? Who are the actual problem makers? And that can do it in a sensible way that doesn't end up where everybody suffers from it. United Nations World Economic Forum is one of the key elements and the key tools that are being utilised around the world to push agendas that have got no positive intentions towards anyone, and it needs to be cut. It's a cancer that needs to be cut out. So when I said I had some additional information, because these buggers are reliant on trying to frighten the fucking life out of all of you wussies out there that seem to think that the world is going to end in 10 years time because the climate expert Alexandria Cortez, fucking whatever her name is, said so, and David eugenics freak Attenborough did. Oh, I found that funny, by the way. The excrement rebellion banging on David Attenborough's door. How'd you like that, you old fart? The other part that they're pushing is to do with this Ponzi China virus. The one that everybody's supposed to be able to lock down for, because, you know, another one of these scenarios that the world is going to end and you all have to give in to everything that they say, unless. I took a look at the ONS data for the UK today, and you will find that there's going to be similarities to this. Doesn't matter where you are located around the world, except for China, of course, who apparently have miraculously got no deaths and haven't had since, what, April? Tossers. Right, based on the ONS figures, and pay attention to the fact that all you're getting from the media is the panic porn of, oh my god, the numbers are going up, the cases have gone up dramatically, oh my god, the deaths are rising, blah blah blah. If you are under 30 years old, your risk, as in case fatality risk, reported cases, numbers of deaths, so in reality it would actually be less than this, because you've got, if I mentioned it last week, you've got the IFR, that's infection fatality risk, We don't know what the full number of people that have been infected are. So case fatality, which is the higher risk ratio. If you're under 30 years old, 0.002%. If you're under 40, 0.005%. If you are under 75, 0.119%. So when I'm saying these things, I'm talking about if you're under 30, that is anybody 30 years below. When I say under 40s, 40 below, right the way down to just born. When I say under 75s, I mean 75 right the way back. So this is not done in 5-year increments or anything like that. For the over 75s, the one that everybody's supposed to be fucking panicking about, 1.384% is the risk ratio. And you got these cunts out there and that turning around and saying that this is the be and end all, you know, the pandemic to end the fucking world. For the over 75s, you have got a greater risk of death going into the fucking bathroom than dying from this poxy thing. And above all, the biggest and most horrendous piece of blatant ignorance across all governments that are pushing this shit, which is shutting all of the SMEs, because you remember, according to their bullshit plan, you make sure that the taxpayer money and that gets funded off to the little wanker members of the World Economic Forum and that handed over to those fucking communists as well. Destroy all businesses for the sake of unemployment, the risk of death through unemployment, all those jobs that are being lost because of what these lockdowns, social distancing, fucking masks, the whole deal. 1.93%. You've got a greater risk of dying as a result of these so-called cures than you have against the disease. This shit makes me fucking furious. You've had France and Germany saying that they're going to have this lockdown. You've got all these various nations around Europe. I've ran the figures for the whole of Europe. The percentages of cases and that have gone up by something like around 280%. Who gives a shit? It's the risk ratio that matters. People die all the time. The number of people that are going to be dying as a result of the fucking closures around hospitals, people being afraid to go to hospitals, people not being tested for cancers, people not being tested for fucking leukemia, or 28 of the other viruses that are more deadly than this bullshit, all being left by the wayside. Because everybody has just forgotten what we knew yesterday so that they can push through a whole load of bollocks to make a whole bunch of wussies go out and wet the fucking bed and want to stay at home. It's bollocks. Absolute bollocks of the highest order. And the fucking politicians that are responsible for letting this go are making it so much worse. I'll tell you what, the lot of them need fucking hanging. This is where real bloody investigations need to be put into place. I'm not talking about people diving out into the streets and going into mass fucking riots and that and doing all the idiot shit that you see out in America and that with all those fucking looters and morons. I'm talking about focused fucking rage. Right, you bombard your bloody MPs with letters and saying, what the fucking hell do you think you're playing at? I mean, literally, I mean, when you've had this leftist bullshit ideology and all this panic porn, it's literally fucking with your head. So give it back to them. Give it back to them. Have their bloody mail sacks absolutely loaded. Anytime they appear on a TV programme or anything like that, if it appears on YouTube or anywhere, bombard them with What the fuck do you think you're doing? But don't just turn around and go wanker, 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 as much as I would love to and continually will do in this format. When I'm out writing, when I'm writing letters to MPs, which I do, I state the facts. I have stated the facts about the fact that a bathroom is more dangerous than this shit. I have stated the fact that 1.93% is the problem from unemployment and a far greater risk than any of this shit. Get the facts. I mean, have a look at that Cummings fella, whatever his name is. I can't remember his bloody name. The Irish guy. I can't remember what his bloody name is. Ivor Cummings, I think his name is. Get a hold of the people that actually do know what they're talking about and just bombard these bastards with facts and then say, what the hell do you think you're playing at? You do have a voice. It's about time you bloody found it. And stop being one of these poxy bloody wusses. Forget about the, because I've got to remind myself of this bloody word as well. Forget about the Allodoxaphobia. Don't be fearful of people's opinions. Don't be fearful of these arseholes that go, oh my God, you're not wearing a mask, you're killing grandma. He said, yeah, you cunt. You're killing grandma. You're killing fucking grandma, bloody father, mother, children, and even the buggers that haven't been born yet, you thick bastards. It's about time people got bloody... Get some education, understand what the fuck's going on. Understand the bullshit that's being fed through your government. The stupid fucking ideologies that are being fed throughout the world. And if there aren't people that are prepared to stand up in a political sphere, force it on them. Do the exact same thing to them that they had been trying to do to what they have been doing to you and they're continuing to do to you. Bombard the bastards. Shame them. Write your letters. Make your feelings known. Go on your protest, but whatever you do if you go on a protest, do not walk around smashing up other people's property. You're hitting the... If you do that, you're hitting the very people that you claim to be defending. And especially for those prats out in America, understand that. Donald Trump is not responsible enough for you to be going out there and smashing some unemployed poor buggers, and probably black as well, that way you claiming to be fighting again for their rights. You're destroying their fucking lives. You're not touching the ones that are actually causing the problem. If you want to focus on anything, focus on the fuckers that are actually doing it. Because if you don't do that, you become part of the problem then. Proper bloody rant this week, isn't it? And it is, and it's a deserved rant as well, because it keeps coming. There's more and more bullshit. I mean, I have seen a letter that's been distributed of, and I don't know how true it is. I mean, I would have put it up, and I would have brought some attention to it, if I could actually verify it. Something coming out of Canada, and now all of this bullshit is going to be pushed and pushed and pushed. I wouldn't be at all surprised. But fuck it, time's come. Well, it's long overdue, quite frankly. Very much long overdue. Learn things, understand things, learn facts. Don't just go with bullshit tagline rhetoric, running around the streets shouting capitalism sucks or socialism's the answer or I don't care. Get some bloody facts first. Understand what it is that you're supposed to actually be fighting against. And when you do understand what you're fighting against, make sure that you're actually making that known directly towards the target. Stop causing more problems to the innocent, because that's effectively what they want you to do. They'll sit back in their ivory towers and go, yeah, You've gone out and you've burnt somebody's car. What do I give a shit? It's not mine. You've gone and broken into some store somewhere because you're pissed off with something. Great. Not my fucking store. What do I care? Get a clue. If you're going to target something, target the actual people themselves and not violently. Bombard them with the same method that you've been bombarded with. Shame the buggers. Don't watch their idiot media. Don't be taken in by the bullshit. Get a clue. Learn. Then one day you might be able to actually go, right, let's have a look at something like the Sisyphus complex solution. Where are the problems? What can we actually do? Can we get that John Hoskyns recreation map together and say, how do we actually take the world forward where we don't have to be pushed by morons and inbreds anymore? And it'll be a lot better for everyone. And as Forrest Gump said, that's about as much as I can say about that. Or something like that. I probably got that wrong as well. Anyway, I'm busting for a piss now, so see you next week. Bye bye.